Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a second draft of a previous lesson we did from Daniel's 12th chapter. We recently completed the book of Daniel start to finish, but we actually began some 9 months ago with the final chapter. It's a book of 12 chapters, one of the major prophets, the shortest of the prophets categorized as major. And we could do a lot better, so that's what we're determined to do today. But we want to begin by reviewing what we already covered in the chapter in the 11th chapter, and we divided it in two. So the first thing we read in the earlier lesson is of the first 20 verses of the 11th chapter is that there's going to be the Greeks are going to displace the Persians under whose governance the Judeans in Daniel are currently serving and belonging to. And this Greek conqueror there's going to be nothing like the world's ever seen. He's going to conquer the known world and beyond in 10 short years, and he's not named, but we can identify him accurately as Alexander. And a lot of the subsequent material in the first 20 chapters of and it predicts that his kingdom is going to be divided. So a lot of the subsequent material in the first 20 verses of the 11th chapter pertain to the dynamics and the power struggles between the king of the north, which was Syria, and Mesopotamia and Persia. That was what was conquered by Alexander's general Seleucid in the post-Alexandrian death power shakeup. And then there's the king of the south, which would have been the Ptolemies of Egypt, and they ruled all the way. The first 20 verses takes us all the way up. We're not provided the information of the names, so we can mark them all the way up to Ptolemy the Fifth, and we know by historical hindsight that the names of the Seleucid monarchs vary between Seleucids and Antiochus. In the 21st verse, we read of a particularly wicked and detestable king of the north and his exploits by the name of Antiochus IV, known as Epiphanes. And there's just 10 relevant verses that we're going to cover before we cover more extensively the 13 verses in greater detail, which we read of in the 12th verses. But we just want to establish the connection in advance. The 12th chapter speaks of yet-to-be-fulfilled prophecies. This brings us to the apocalypse, the end of the world as it is known, whereas that in which covers before it is already fulfilled history. We knew it happened. It had been exactly as he told it. And what Antiochus IV is both a historical figure and historical or future omen for the end-time dictator, the anti-Messiah who will rise and rule much in the same way and do a lot of the same things that his historical predecessor did. So in the 21st verse we read, "And in his place shall arise a despised one, to whom they shall not give the excellency of the rule, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the rule by flatteries." So Antiochus had no legitimate claim to the throne. He was of royal blood, but the throne technically belonged to his brother's son, who he displaced as his guardian, and he was subtle, and he came in peaceably and seized the reign or the rule with flatteries. That's the way the end-time dictator, the anti-Messiah, is going to rise to power. It's going to become as a peacemaker. He's going to bring peace to the Middle East and Europe and all throughout the world. But flattery is not communication, it is manipulation. And through the mechanism of flattery, he deceives many of the covenant nations' people to forsake their covenants. Verse 24, "And he shall enter peaceably, even unto the richest place of the province, and do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers, distribute among them plunder and spoil and supplies, and devise his plots against the stronghold, but only for a time." So he's going to go where no king has dared gone before. He's going to profane the sacred temple in ways of which we read of in greater detail in subsequent verses. And it kind of speaks of his excursions to Egypt, which he doesn't quite conquer, but he returns from richer and wealthier than he had before he took off. Verse 28, "Then he shall return to his land with much supplies, and his heart be against this sacred covenant, and he shall act and return to his land." So he's got his eye. He's targeting the sacred covenant, the covenant people, the temple, and he's going to defile their temple and compel many of them to forsake their covenant path through flatteries and deceptions and manipulations. And verse 31, and strong ones shall arise from him and profane the temple, the stronghold, which shall take away that which is continual, and place the abomination that lays waste. So the abomination that lays waste is what we are told of in the warned of in the Mount Olivet discourse is in the synoptic gospels. That's going to be a repeated item, but what was continual was the sacrifices, and what he replaced it with was sacrificing pigs on the altar. Antiochus sacrificed pigs on the altar to Father Zeus, the head of the polytheistic pantheon, the mightiest of their mighty ones. And that was the abomination, and the temple will be rebuilt in Jerusalem a third time, most likely in my lifetime. We will witness to see this, and we don't know when, but we know that the anti-Messiah will come. Next verse, and by flatteries he shall profane those who do wickedness against the covenant, but the people who know their Elohim shall be strong and shall act. So I want to recommend here the deuterocanonical readings of 1st and 2nd Maccabees, especially the second chapter describes this in greater detail, that many are going to bow, they're going to be convinced and converted by the intrigue and subterfuge to accommodate this wicked tyrant's demands that they forsake the covenant. And those of the people who have insight shall give understanding to many, and they shall stumble by sword and flame, by captivity and plundering for days. So there's going to be martyrdoms. The rate and the turnout of Jewish martyrs was something unprecedented, because they had never had quite a king like this before, who had so disrespected their temple and violated their own covenant, and many are going to pay the price for their faith with their life. And this has caused many scholars erroneously, because we're going to read of the resurrection in Daniel's 12th chapter, verses 2 and 3. This has compelled many scholars erroneously to attribute the martyrdoms which Antiochus afflicted to giving rise to the Jewish doctrine of the resurrection. And the Jewish doctrine of the resurrection, we just want to explain this before we commented on greater detail, is at least as old as the patriarchs, because when the Savior confronts the Sadducees, who denied the doctrine of the resurrection, and asked the perplexing question of whose man's wife shall he be in the resurrection, this woman who passed through 7 brothers all the way, and he said, you know not the power of the scriptures, for it is written, he quotes Exodus 6:3, I am the Yahweh thy Elohim, of Jacob, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he is eternally alive, and by implicit declaration, so too are the patriarchs alive with him. They have not gone anywhere. And also David writes of it in the 16th Psalm, and it really became a cardinal doctrine of the Orthodox Jewish faith by the time of the Pharisees, through which the Orthodox, modern Orthodox Judaism descends. And Maimonides, the famous medieval Aristotelian-influenced Jewish philosopher, considered it one of the 13 articles of faith of the Orthodox Jewish religion. And when they stumble, they shall be helped, a little help, but many shall join them by flattery. So again, there's that dichotomy between the faithful and those who forsake. Those who have faiths will not cave into expedience. They will follow the path of obedience, even to the point of death and martyrdom. And the king shall do as he pleases, and exalt himself, and show himself to be above every mighty one, and speak incredible matters against the El of mighty ones, and shall prosper until the wrath has been accomplished. For what has been decreed shall be done. So this king had a severe and unusual God complex. This was not unusual amongst ancient despots of the ancient Near East, but he exalted himself. He thought that no God was worthy to be compared to him, so he really went above and beyond the ordinary God complex. And but we're going to meet his end and read of it in greater detail in that which we will not cover. The 10th and final verse of the 11th chapter we want to comment on is, and have no regard for the mighty ones of his fathers, nor for the desire of woman, nor regard any of the mighty ones, but shall exalt himself above them all. So he thinks he's the end-all, be-all, and this connects to what we read of in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 4. He will sit in the temple, the reconstructed temple. Remember, it's going to most likely be reconstructed in your and my lifetimes, and he will declare himself God. So he is and much of the material of which you read of the apocalypse that corresponds to Revelation unfolds in Daniel's chapter. Now, that's the longest preamble we ever gave. We're going to get straight to the lesson itself now. Verse 1, Now at that time Michael shall stand up. The great head is standing over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of distress, such as never was, since there was a nation, until that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. So the first figure we read of is Michael. He is one of the two angels named in scriptures. The other is Gabriel, but Michael is the archangel. He is Lucifer's replacement as the supreme angel, and what we read of him in Daniel 8:15 and 10:13, and we read of his encounters against Satan, or the adversary, in the New Testament, and Jude 9, where this is Jude. The book of Jude was heavily influenced by Jewish apocalyptic literature, which flourished during the intertestamental period, but it isn't quite inspired. It lacks a lot of the materials he draws from. He connects it to what we read of in Deuteronomy 34:10, an episode which the Michael protects the dead body of Moses, and Lucifer contends for it, and he says, Yahweh rebuke thee. So he's not quite strong enough to counteract the supreme created being. Yet in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 7-9, we read that Michael the archangel and his angels shall war against the dragon, that's Satan, and they shall defeat him. So he is the instrument of Satan's defeat. He will cast him to the earth, and he's the guardian protector of the nation of Israel. Now, this time of distress, such as has never was since there was under a nation, this is the time of tribulation, alternately referred to as the time of trouble for Jacob by the Old Testament, but this is the severest, what they went through, what the Jewish people more specifically went through during Antiochus IV is going to be on a global scale, and Christians are going to be persecuted. It is known as the Great Tribulation, and but it is the end time, so there's going to be a dichotomy. Some will be saved or delivered, and everyone who is written in the book. This is alternately more extensively referred to as the Book of Life or Book of Remembrance in other places, but the key concept is the names of the saved and the elect are recorded in a book which is registered in heaven, and through that they will be saved by the inscription of their name therein. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth wake up, some to everlasting life, and some to reproaches, everlasting abhorrences. So this is the dichotomy between the saved and the unsaved. There's going to be those who are resurrected to everlasting life, eternal life, and some to eternal abhorrence or reproaches. So that is the dichotomy between heaven and hell. And the people who are placed there are there because they belong there. They're there because they deserve to be there, and for a variety of reasons. So the wicked and unrepentant will find themselves in everlasting. So what we do with this life has eternal consequences. So we shouldn't take that lightly, because how we live this life will literally determine our eternal standing. And we all want to make it and bring as many as we can up to heaven with Father Yahweh, where we will dwell in intimate proximity with him. And those who have insight shall shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. So those who have insight reminds us of the historical event already fulfilled. It was prophecy when Daniel wrote it, but it had already been fulfilled. The people who have insight, verse 33, which we read, and give understanding to many, that the insight in their understanding is likened to the contagious effect of the light which emanates from a star. It shall spread unto many others, and its light will shine to exist. So we are not to hoard knowledge, and this speaks of an increase of theological knowledge towards the end times, and the light which those who have insight and understanding will bring them into everlasting life, and the light they exude will be forever and ever. So the light they exude comes from the eternal light, who is personified in the form of the light of the world, Yahshua Messiah, John 8:12 and 9:5. But you, Daniel, hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall diligently search, and knowledge shall increase. So he's given the opposite instruction that John the Revelator receives in Revelation 22:10, where John is instructed to make this book immediately known. He is to seal this book until the time, yet it was recorded and recognized in the Old Testament, the dating of which there is some scholarly contention. Some believe that Daniel never even existed, and he is a figure of a metaphor, but we endorse the historicity of scriptures. We believe that Daniel was a literal human being who spoke prophecy and served as prime minister to the pagan conquerors of the Jewish people, and that but what does this have to do with what I should be communicating here is that we should just settle this right now. We endorse that Daniel lived and flourished and wrote in the 5th century, but perhaps his book wasn't released until the 2nd century. But in the end times, many shall diligently search. So. And knowledge shall increase. So there's going to be an awakening, a revival of understanding amongst the elect in matters pertaining to the end times in theology and et al., etc. And Daniel is very much a predecessor. He was giving unique insight, understanding, and wisdom. We read as early as the 17th verse of the 1st chapter. And the additional thing, he was given the power to interpret dreams, unique from his Hebrew companions, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as they were referred to in their Babylonian nomenclature. Then I, Daniel, looked and saw 2 others standing, one on the bank of the river and the other on that bank. So these 2 others are clearly angels. They are not men. This is an apocalyptic vision. He looked and saw. So this is a vision which the author of this vision is Michael the Archangel. We read earlier that we mentioned in 10:13. So this is connected to the same vision of that which we read of in the 11th time. It's categorized into a separate chapter because chapter 11 refers to already fulfilled prophecy, and chapter 12 refers to yet to be fulfilled prophecy. And one said to the man dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long until the end of these wonders? So the man dressed in linen reminds us of that which we read in Daniel's 10th chapter, 5th or 6th verse, I think the 6th one, and this one is asking, this one is identified as the one who is above the waters, and he's asking to no one in particular, perhaps or actually in the next verse you read, it's to the other angel, how long until the end of these wonders? And in the New Testament, we are discouraged against speculation as to the exact chronological occurrence of the tribulation and the end times and the apocalypse and the second coming. But this is a genuine question of curiosity, and he receives the answer in the 7th verse. And I heard the man dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, and he held up his right hand and his left hand to the heavens, and swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for an appointed times and a half. And when they have ended scattering the power of the sacred people, then all these shall be completed. So he's not given a timetable or a chronologically exact or precise mark of time, but it will happen apocalyptic. The apocalypse operates according to a mysterious yet exact timetable. So everything is set in motion, and we have the fuller picture of this end time event in the book of Revelation, which I advise you to read and study. And I think there is some truth in reading the newspaper, especially what's going on with the new Middle East in one hand, and reading the book of Daniel and Revelation, and also familiarizing yourself with the wider scope of end time revelation and you can see these events literally unfolding, and the scattering of the power of the sacred people. That's not going to be the Jewish people, it's going to be the sacred people. Although the Jews are part of the elect, we read in the book of Revelation, they have a significant place and role in salvation history, and they will be partakers of the election and salvation in heaven. But the sacred people are going to be the new covenant people at this time, the Christians, although the Jews will experience and a lot of them are going to be converted to the correct religion. Theirs is an incomplete religion, at least as it took off from the beginning of the New Testament. Ours religion is consistent with their Old Testament. Theirs, they deny the prophecy, even though of the Messiah, even though it aligns with at least hundreds of their prophecies. And I heard, but I did not understand. So I said, "My master, what is the latter end of these times?" So the I is a self-reference to Daniel, and he does not understand the answer that the angel had given the other angel in response to his question. He had heard, but not understood. So he asked, what is the latter end of this times? He's probably looking for when is not an implausible translation. So when is going to be these times? And again, it is not for us to know, but we have to be watching, witnessing, working, and waiting for the second coming. And the most important thing is working. So we are not to the promise of the second coming does not eliminate or absolve our responsibilities to bring what we can of the kingdom to the earth until it finally and fully emerges in literal form with the second coming. And he said, "Go, Daniel, for the words are hidden and sealed till the end of the end." So once more, we read that word sealed. We read that in as early as verse 4. So the words are hidden and sealed till the time of the end. So we're going to know when these events unfold as they unfold in the descriptive detail in the end times revelation. There's prolific ones throughout both the Old and the New Testament. And one thing I should have mentioned earlier is that the in reference to the resurrection, the term itself is found nowhere in the Old Testament, but the concept is clearly communicated in passages such as Exodus 6:3 and Psalm 16:10 and 11, and Daniel 12:2 and 3, and also elsewhere in Job. So they did have a premonition or understanding, and it became authorized and accepted, as I earlier described, by the Pharisees and the Maimonides, the Jewish Aristotelian influenced medieval philosopher. "Many shall be cleansed and made white and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedness, and none of the wicked shall understand, but those who have insight shall understand." So the cleansing and the making white, the white is the color, which is symbolically significant of purity and being refined through the furnace of affliction, and that's what we must undergo. But the wicked, testament to their nature and character, will do what their spirit dictates and determines. Their actions will follow their attitudes, and because they are wicked, they will do wickedness because they can do nothing else. And but those who have insight and understanding, they will understand what is happening, why it is happening. They're going to know in advance how it's going to happen, and they're going to cling strongly to the promises of deliverance that this necessary, and understand the necessity of the tribulation and why it is necessary for a universal trial to differentiate and separate those of the fair weather faith from those of the complete, authentic, all weather faith. And from that time, that which is continual is taken away, and the abomination that lays waste is placed, is 1,290 days. So we already read that term, the abomination, that is referenced throughout the Synoptic Gospels, Mount Olivet discourses, and we read that earlier in the 11th chapter. But the sacrifices will be continual in the reconstructed temple, not the one that was destroyed in 70 A.D., but the one that's going to be rebuilt, most likely in your and mine's lifetime. And this figure, 1,290 days, translates. Now, there's a difficulty in interpreting, because such as the 70 weeks of terms, that is not literal weeks, but those are years in sets of 7. We did one on that. You can type in Corey Johnston. Daniel 9, 20 through 27, the 70 weeks. But here it's literal days. So this roughly translates as the 3.5-year period. The end-time dictator is going to come in peaceably and rise and rule for 7 years, but at the midway point, he's going to reveal his true character, and he's going to become a man of violence and perdition, and not quite what those who he deceived and allured had expected or anticipated him to be. Blessed is he who is waiting earnestly and comes to the 1,335 days. So after this time, we interpret this as literal days, as blessed is those who are waiting earnestly. That's what we are doing right now. We are waiting in earnestness for this coming, but this is more specifically relevant and appropriate for those who live and experience the trials of the tribulation. There's going to be... after the temple is going to be turned down, there's going to be an extensive, less than 100 days added, and those who wait and endure to the end, that is going to be the end, to which there's going to be no more enduring to the end to add on to. But you, go your way till the end, and rest and arise to your lot at the end of the days. So this is the Almighty speaking. We should have qualified that earlier. In other translations, it's identified as the Almighty, and not explicitly so here, but he's telling Daniel to go his way till the end. He's assured of the resurrection. He meets the qualifications and prerequisites, so he will have rest and eternally, and everything that he has predicted will be fulfilled. Daniel will be watching from heaven these events that he predicted to be fulfilled. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.